Hi, everyone. We'll get started shortly. We'll give it just one more minute for people to join. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren, and welcome to our South Carolina Rapid DNA webinar hosted by GTH DNA and the South Carolina Police Chiefs Association. We have 7 distinguished speakers that will be covering the advancements of rapid DNA in the United States and specifically here in South Carolina. And the format for today's webinar is that we will hear from our 7 presenters whose presentations will last approximately 10 minutes each. And then we will have about 15 minutes to address questions from the audience before the webinar ends at 11:15. And we are having a little bit of a technical difficulty with our chat box. So if you do have a question, you can email it to me. And you should all have my email. It is the lshelberg@gth-gov.com email. And we will do our best to address your questions. And if we don't have time to address your question during the webinar, we will work with the speakers panel to follow up with your questions later this week. So today we are very excited to have the Executive Director of the South Carolina Police Chiefs Association, JJ Jones, give our opening remarks. JJ served as a law enforcement officer in South Carolina for over 25 years. And before taking the job to run the Police Chiefs Association, JJ served as the operations major for the Lexington County Sheriff's Department and then as the assistant chief for the Case Department of Public Safety. JJ, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, law enforcement in South Carolina. The South Carolina Police Chiefs Association is excited to be co-hosting today's Rapid DNA webinar. I'd like to thank each of our speakers and many attendees that are taking time to participate in today's event. There's a lot of excitement about the future of rapid DNA in our state. I believe you'll find today's agenda extremely helpful for law enforcement agencies that are considering moving forward with rapid DNA programs. Since the 1990s, DNA has allowed our crime labs to assist law enforcement with solving crimes that were otherwise unsolvable. DNA has literally transformed how we identify and prosecute bad guys in the state of South Carolina. The South Carolina law enforcement is grateful to the dedication of SLED and also Chief Keel's Crime Lab for leading us through the DNA journey during these last 30 years. His leadership and SLED's dedication to DNA has been exemplary. Both law enforcement and the Crime Lab are now facing challenges as we move to the next chapter in DNA advancement. Forensic DNA is so good at solving crime, the SLED Crime Lab sometimes is overwhelmed with requests for DNA testing. With current DNA backlogs, the Crime Lab is limited in its ability to process nonviolent cases in a timely manner sometimes. Law enforcement sees rapid DNA as an answer to give the Crime Lab some relief on cases that would be appropriate for rapid DNA testing, especially property crimes. And we all know how those work in South Carolina with auto break-ins and burglaries. Those are one of our biggest challenges. Police officers and sheriff's deputies are excited at the prospect of getting immediate answers with certain DNA cases rather than waiting weeks and sometimes even months or years. Imagine a cop coming home to a burglary at a scene, finding blood on a window where the criminal entered. Today, odds are that crime could go unsolved without DNA evidence. Delays in DNA testing can make arresting a suspect and getting conviction difficult, but if a burglary suspect could be developed on the day the crime occurred due to the rapid DNA, the impact could be a lot different. Law enforcement would be empowered and motivated to pursue immediate action on the case and put those bad guys in jail. There are a bunch of success stories that are being shared throughout the country when LE has access to rapid DNA. These success stories are even occurring when states don't have access to search criminal offender DNA databases. But we know we can't maximize the power of rapid DNA until law enforcement is able to submit criminal DNA evidence tested on rapid DNA to state and national CODIS database for criminal offenders. We're excited that the FBI is joining us today to explain their plan to allow crime scene evidence tested on rapid to be entered into CODIS. And I'm really excited that the FBI's plan is something that could be ready in the next 1 to 2 years. We will also hear from our partners at the State Law Enforcement Division. They're planning for the implementation of a statewide rapid DNA program in South Carolina using these standards developed by the FBI. Even though CODIS searching is not yet available, I would encourage local law enforcement agencies to start planning for the use of rapid DNA before CODIS searching is available. Today, you're going to hear about many applications of rapid DNA outside searching CODIS that can help you solve crime right now. For example, later in this webinar, you're going to hear from one of my former coworkers and Lexington County Investigations Captain Jesse Lance, whose agency is actively planning to advance with rapid DNA prior to having access to CODIS. I wish all the law enforcement agencies in South Carolina the best of luck as they prepare for rapid DNA. I just ask one thing. We need to remember that experts are with DNA. It's our 30-year DNA partner over at the SLED Crime Lab. I encourage you to consult with SLED every step of the way as you develop your rapid programs. They will be able to advise you how to make the decisions on your program, and with working with SLED closely, it will provide them with further insight as they work to implement the FBI's future CODIS searching plan. Please enjoy today's event and feel free to reach out to me at any time or my colleagues at the South Carolina Police Chiefs Association. We appreciate each and every one of you that have joined us, and I pray that you're safe and you learned something today. Have a good class.
Thank you, JJ. Our next presenter is Lisa Hurst. Lisa is the Director of North America for GTH DNA, where she has worked for over 25 years on forensic DNA public policy and legislation. Lisa will give us an overview of rapid DNA, a legal review, and federal funding opportunities related specifically to South Carolina. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lauren. As Lauren just said, I'll give a kind of a quick overview on rapid. You're going to get a lot about rapid over the next hour, so I'll keep my comments sort of high level, but with a few more specific notes, especially with regards to rapid and the structure in South Carolina for rapid different applications. So jumping in, what is rapid DNA? Rapid, most importantly, is DNA analysis that processes sample in 90 minutes. It was designed for operation by non-laboratory personnel, so the end user in mind of being that local police department, sheriff's office. Again, you can imagine this is a bit of a game changer potentially on some investigations. You can act on investigative leads within hours rather than waiting the week, month, year that it could take at your state crime lab or at a local crime lab if you're served by a local lab. 90 minutes is a game changer. Same scientific analysis methods as they use in crime labs. It is a self-contained, desktop sized. So if you think maybe about a printer or a microwave and stand it on its edge, that's about the size of rapid DNA of the instrument itself. A few knots before we jump too far into rapid, a few knots to follow with rapid DNA and to understand. This is not a replacement for traditional, your lab-based DNA analysis. That's always going to be the workhorse, especially because at this time, rapid is not advised for your more complex caseworks, your mixtures, your degraded samples, anything touch DNA that's too too small, too minute of a sample, not advised. That all needs to go to the crime lab, where the instrumentation in the lab is a lot more sensitive. And of course, we have trained analysts who are more adept at identifying issues with different DNA profiles as they may come up. But rapid is great for single source samples. That's really what's recommended right now. It's not yet, we get this question a lot, rapid DNA itself has not yet been challenged for admissibility in court. Now, it has been used in court, but the defense did not bring admissibility questions yet. So we expect at some point that will happen. The defense will bring that admissibility challenge. In the meantime, the need really for admissibility hearings has been mitigated by the use of an A swab and B swab collection process. This has been recommended by some scientific working groups that the FBI has led in the past. The A swab is always going to be your best swab. The first swab you get from a drop of blood. The B swab will be a second swab that you take from that same piece of evidence. The B swab then goes straight into the rapid instrument instead. The A swab would go to your crime lab and get in that line, or at least sit in your evidence room until you might need it. The B swab then can be your quick presumptive lead, if you will, in an investigation. So one for rapid, one for traditional lab analysis, and always we recommend the best local law enforcement rapid DNA programs are those where there is a good working relationship and coordination with accredited crime labs. We always recommend your state lab, your local lab first, but there are also, if those labs are not yet prepared to support your program, there are some great accredited private crime labs, which of course will cost just a little bit of money. So better to go to a SLED or a local lab if you have that opportunity in South Carolina. So a few of the applications, rapid DNA. First, I'm going to talk just a little bit about arrestee DNA identification. So this is collecting a DNA sample at the point of enrollment. Right now in South Carolina, all of your jails should be collecting DNA samples from anyone who is arrested for a felony. Currently, that sample, of course, gets packaged up and sent over to SLED for analysis. But by being able to process that sample while the person is still in custody using rapid DNA, right? So you're taking their fingerprints, it immediately then gets put into, not the fingerprint, but the DNA sample collected, goes into rapid, a match within 90 minutes potentially. You have that offender still in custody. You're not releasing someone dangerous back to the streets. You're closing loopholes on missed samples because that tie into the booking station will force the collection of DNA. And importantly, I think it really avoids dangerous situations for a lot of your officers where you get a match after the guy has been released from custody. He knows what he did. And when your investigators or officers serving the warrant show up at his door, it could be dangerous. It could be a dangerous situation. So you avoid all of that. Louisiana was the first state to implement arrestee DNA at booking station. Florida is now in the process of rolling out around 10 sites throughout their state. And there's a number of other states that are in development, and we're waiting for some of those to come online, but that includes Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Ohio, and also the FBI. A few notes on booking station enrollment. You have to meet a few criteria. The good news is the first criteria is you have to be able to collect DNA from arrestees during that booking process. South Carolina has the right code to allow that, the right statute that was passed quite a while ago in South Carolina. Also, you have to be legally allowed to use rapid at booking stations. And this can be a little bit tricky because a lot of state laws may say, and the sample shall go to the crime lab for analysis. The South Carolina law is a little bit loose. It allows SLED. It says SLED has to conduct the identification, but it also allows SLED to set up its own regulations. Arguably, there could be room for SLED to create a regulation that says, you know, and part of our identification process are local booking stations that have received authority to operate from the FBI, et cetera. You also, maybe SLED would want, or the powers that be would want some additional language to clarify that. But more importantly, right now, you're not using rapid at booking stations at this time because there is a significant upgrade that has to happen with around your centralized AFIS system and criminal records. That's not a small lift. It uses resources and funding, and then you have to get authority to operate from the FBI. After that, the local live print systems all would have to be updated at your jails, and then you could begin to participate. So at this time, that door is not open to South Carolina, but potentially with the right funding and resources, it could be. And just a quick note, great example in Louisiana, East Baton Rouge was the very first booking site in that state. A bunch of hits already. These are just 5 that I'm aware of. 1-2 Georgia, a carjacking case. They've solved a homicide with their local PD, attempted rape, burglary, and an attempted murder of a police officer, all through their rapid DNA system. And that's at the booking station. So that's collecting those arrestee samples and being able to identify that person again while they're still sitting in custody for a different crime. So moving into evidence applications. 1-to-1 is your most common. This is where you've got a crime scene stain and a known offender, and you can, again, just compare the two to each other. Great opportunity for identifications as well as exclusions. So you're not, maybe you can limit the amount of sort of broad stroke investigations where you're having to interview a bunch of people from the public. It can reduce allegations of bias and other just community confrontations that could happen as you do that investigation. Local databases, now this would be comparing 1 to maybe hundreds, maybe thousands as your database grows. Local agencies, where we see this a lot is where the state has not allowed access to its index of offenders. There's some great examples of local databases around the country. And in fact, some of these local databases have grown to become actually regional. So several counties may be sharing all together. There's a great example out of Bensalem in Pennsylvania, a little township. They had a 42% reduction in property crime and sex assaults as they grew that database, and they were able to really kind of pull in a lot of their usual offenders to check against their crime scenes. The next sort of bigger one is the DNA database that your state lab currently holds. They would make another version of that database available just to local enforcement for checking. I'm not saying that SLED has been discussing this, but we do see this happening in a few other states. A lot of matches are made at the state level. These are a few states already sharing that database. Again, it's not the code base, but it's just that group of offenders who the state has collected under its own state law for inclusion in that state database. Also, the big, the big gorilla that everyone wants access to then is CODIS. 1 to 23 million. That's about the number of samples in CODIS right now. It might have gotten bigger than that. Right now, you cannot search evidence against CODIS, but change is coming. We believe in 2025, the FBI representative will be speaking a little bit more about that. Watch for these publications to come out this year. There will also be opportunities for comments to make sure, I mean, hey, law enforcement, make sure this is a fit, not just good for the lab, but something that makes sense from your perspective as well. And I would really strongly recommend working groups to start getting in front of what this is going to look like. I think it's important to include legislators, because at some point you're going to need funding, probably from the state. You want some policymakers who are ready to champion this and understand it well. If you have them in the working group, you can do that. Lastly, right now, there's not a lot of federal grants that are available for RAPID. DOJ has been a little bit stingy with the money for DNA. They want to make sure that anything that's processed goes into RAPID. Goes into CODIS. And because much of this activity cannot go into CODIS, a lot of normal federal grants are not available, but there are federal earmarks. These are the locations over the last 3 years that have received earmarks, except I want to asterisk the blue sites Our agencies that just within the last month or two have applied for the next round of funding. Congress has been really active and excited about Rapid DNA. They funded a lot of these projects. The next cycle will probably kick off in the fall to winter of this year. So if you're interested, let us at GTH know. We'd be happy to try to point you through the process. But earmarks are a great way to go right now if you're looking for some funding to get started with those first year costs. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And just a reminder, and to those of you who joined a little late, our chat box is down. So if you have any questions, please send them to my email. And you should all have my email. It's the lshelberg@gth-gov.com. And our next presenter is Robert O'Brien. Rob is the Forensic Biology Section Lead for Global Forensic Justice Center at Florida International University. And Rob's organization is a leading academic-based forensic service provider that has assisted government with evaluating and implementing forensic programs throughout the world. Rob will provide a technical overview of how Rapid DNA systems work. Thanks for joining us, Rob. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so yes, I'm Robert O'Brien. I'm the Forensic Biology Section Manager here at GFJC, Global Forensic and Justice Center, which is one of the preeminent centers of Florida International University. So I'm just going to provide a quick technology brief on Rapid DNA and the different instruments and just some basic principles behind what they do. So Rapid DNA really started looking for something that can process samples in about 90 minutes. It compresses the standard DNA analysis workflow into an easy use and mobile process. That was one of the big requirements, is that you can actually take this out of the laboratory. It's designed to be operated by non-technical users. So first responders, military, law enforcement can all do this, and is minimal hands-on time. So even though the instrument may take a while to run, the 90 minutes, the actual hands-on time of the operator is designed to be less. Typically, probably not even like 5 to 10 minutes. The step one is you're going to take your sample, place it into a cartridge, and this cartridge is then inserted into the instrument. The instrument is going to process the sample or samples, depending on which instrument you use. It takes about 90 minutes, and then you get your DNA results. And these are confirmatory and can be used to generate investigative leads. We're generating these instruments generate the same quality of data, the same DNA profile as what will be generated in the laboratory, because it's using the same chemistries. The two current instruments on the market, you have the Rapid Hit ID, which is put out by Thermo Fisher Scientific, and then you have the Andy instrument, which is put out by the company also called Andy. They're about similar. They both have the same idea behind them. It's sample in, answer out in about 90 minutes. They're not too different in size also. Both companies have reference and casework type cartridges. So your reference cartridges are going to be used for your buccal swabs or any other type of reference sample. You can also process reference blood samples on them. And then you have your casework type cartridges, which will be used for more things that you will encounter at a crime scene, whether it be blood, bone, tissue, saliva, hair, or even taking swabbings off of clothing for wear of the items. The process is simple. You're going to place your sample in a cartridge. This doesn't take that long. Like I said, usually 5 minutes. You will insert it into the instrument. You're going to put in your sample information. It could be a case number, exhibit number, so forth. And then you're going to get your resulting DNA profile. And like I said, this is the same chemistry or some very similar chemistry to what's being used in the crime labs. So this is something that can be easily be searched against databases or even matched against samples that are run at the crime lab level. For the operator who may not want to be, who's not necessarily going to be looking at the DNA profiles, the instruments are going to provide an immediate feedback to you. So typically you're going to have like a flag system where you get something like a green flag, which is basically telling you you have a full DNA profile, no reviews required. You can get something that maybe is a yellow, which means that the DNA process did work, but some data review may be needed. And this is where partnerships with your crime labs will be helpful because they can actually review the data for you. If you get a red, it usually means that there was an instrument issue or a possible reagent issue. So this is typically not a sample issue. It means that there may be some troubleshooting that needs to be done with the instrument or the reagent that was used. So once again, green, full DNA profile, rapid software. So you can actually take something with a green and go ahead and do a search and look to get matches with other casework DNA profiles or other suspect profiles. With yellow, it means you do need some kind of a technical reachback support. This can come whether it's your own lab or if they are private labs like Lisa just spoke about, that you can pay, that they will actually go ahead and do this data check for you before it can then be taken to search against DNA from either suspects or other reference samples. And then agencies would need to do validations on these, as is typical with all DNA processing. So you'd want to validate these to determine what types of samples that you're going to run on these instruments, and typically, like what Lisa talked about, you're looking for single source samples, something that where a blood or body fluid was deposited. Those are going to give you your best results with rapid DNA. Talked about the A swab, B swab method, where your A swab, which is your first swab, and usually the better swab goes to the DNA lab. Your B swab is then used to generate an investigative lead. There's also the bouquet method, where you actually take 2 swabs at the same time, and once again, send one to your lab and send one on your rapid DNA instrument. You should also look for your rapid DNA companies to supply some type of a field guide, because sometimes processing certain sample types, like putting a swab in the cartridge, is pretty simple, it's pretty standard, but these can be used for other things like cigarette butts, bone, even tissue, hairs. So for those things, you should ask the companies to provide you some kind of field guide to tell you how to process these and the best way to put them in the cartridges to get the best results. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Rob. Our next presenter is Phoenix Police Department Detective Jay Hovland. Since 2010, Detective Hovland has been a member of the police department's crime laboratory, working to facilitate the forensic process in support of ongoing investigations and trials. In this position, Detective Hovland has become one of the leaders of the Phoenix Police Department's Rapid DNA program. Detective Hovland will shed some light on the transformative impact of rapid DNA within the city of Phoenix and the state of Arizona. Detective, the floor is yours. Thank you, Detective Hovland. We now have the pleasure to hear from Captain Jesse Lance. Captain Lance is the Commander of Investigations and Special Operations with the Lexington County Sheriff's Department. He is also a hazardous device technician with the department's bomb squad and the commander of the department's SWAT team. The Lexington County Sheriff's Office has recently decided to pursue a rapid DNA program. And Captain Lance will discuss how the county plans to use their rapid DNA program once implemented. Over to you, Captain.
Good. You hear me? All right. So
Yep.
Thank you. So a little bit about us, Lexington County Sheriff's Department. We have a population just over 300,000 people. We have about 300 sworn officers. When I just heard Robert said there were 600 officers short, I got lightheaded and my stomach felt upset. So when it comes to this rapid DNA, obviously violent crimes are always a concern for us, but so are property crimes. And Sheriff Kuhn is always willing and working and trying to find better ways to serve our citizens in Lexington County. In doing so, we are trying to find ways that we can better combat our property crime issue. As most places, I'm sure we have a handful of people that's probably committing 85 to 90% of our property crimes. So if we can put a dent on that, that'd be absolutely helpful. In looking for new ways to do stuff, technology has came up and we've done some research. And we believe that DNA is probably the way to help work on our property crime issue. With that being said, Robert just talked about his agency, how their DNA lab can barely keep up with homicides. I also believe that's kind of true with SLED. We rely heavily on SLED to do all of our violent crime stuff. And we don't want to fill their bucket anymore with burglaries and things like that. So we're trying to look at different approaches. One of those approaches is rapid DNA. We believe rapid DNA can have a large impact on a already overburdened crime lab that we have at SLED. So in doing some research on rapid DNA, we looked out to other agencies to see what has worked for them. We happened to come across Buck County in Pennsylvania. It's right outside of Philadelphia. They started a rapid DNA program in 2017. And with that, they've had about a 42% reduction in property crimes. That's a pretty big number. So that is a number, if we can even halfway replicate that, we'd be doing really good for our citizens here. So not just that one example, but multiple other examples, we decided that rapid DNA was a good choice for us. And the next thing that we had to pursue was some funding stuff. And I'm going to talk about how we're pursuing that in just a second. But the other thing that we had to do was develop a plan to make sure that if we got the funding, we'd be capable of actually doing this. So in our plan, some of the things that we've worked out is we'll have the small box up here at headquarters in Lexington County. Officers at scenes, they know how to collect DNA already. They can either collect it. If we need CSI to go down there and collect it, we can have them do that. But there's about 5 or 6 points that we want to make sure we hit. So you've already heard from Lisa about the 2 swab protocol, swab A, swab B, swab A going to the lab, swab B for the rapid. We plan on doing that as well. We just got to teach our guys to take more than 1 swab at this point in time, because if it's ever needed to go to the lab for any reason, we want to make sure that we have that other source that will go to the lab. Another thing that we're looking at, talked a little bit about, is we don't have much of a database here. We are really hopeful for 2025 with working with SLED for get access to CODIS. But as of right now, we'll have one-to-one matches. One-to-one matches, as I said before, burglaries, things like that. It's a small group of people committing the same crimes over and over. They're in our jail quite often. If we can start a good database with them, and then we can do those one-to-one tests for individuals if we have blood at the scene of a burglary or something along those lines. We are looking forward to working with SLED when it comes to the CODIS, getting access to that. Obviously, we have to rely on our partners very heavily with SLED. We're going to continue to do that. We're several years out, but we'll continue to work with everything to do with SLED to try to get that hooked up. Some of the other things that we want to use rapid DNA for is to exonerate the innocent. So we have situations where people are being accused, we have blood at the scene, and let's say it's a violent crime. They provide one story, and if we're able to run the information very quickly, we can do that. And it also gives us access or the ability to access the search warrant. If we have a sample to test against somebody else and we can present that to the judge that we can do that here and now, there'll be a better chance for actually getting those search warrants. You heard about the Florida University, how they mentioned law enforcement. If we don't get a green light, we might have to do a reach back. I don't believe SLED's going to be able to support that right away. So we need to find and secure a match verification service and figure out how we're going to do that and during what circumstances we are going to do that. So this is something that's going to cost us money. So when it comes to money, it comes to budgeting, it comes to time. So we are going to work on that reach back system and how we're going to implement that and who we're going to do that with. And what, like I said, we'll continue to work with SLED if that's something that we can use in the long run, but it's not going to happen now. And then the last biggest thing is the property crimes might be one of our main focus. There are a lot of situations where we want to look at and utilize rapid DNA. So violent crimes, if we do have something that has DNA, it is still going to be sent to SLED as it always has been. But what this will allow is for that 90-minute turnaround, the opportunity for us to use that as an investigation interrogation type tool when we are dealing with somebody with a violent crime. So instead of waiting for a long period of time to get the results, we can get those results very quickly. As Jay was just talking about how they did on several of their cases before they got out of the hospital, before they got out of the jail, they were actually able to already identify that person. The actual samples would still be sent to SLED to get verification, But that interview and interrogation tool will be very, very helpful in a lot of things that we work on. Another thing that I think would be interesting is deceased individuals who are not identified. Let's say they're decomposed, burnt, something along those lines. We can use family member DNA to compare those. So I think there's a lot out there and a lot of situations in which we can actually use rapid DNA. We just haven't explored all of them yet, and we're hoping we get to. So the timeline and the funding, I believe that's probably the main reason I'm here to talk to y'all, just because we're actually here at Lexington County Sheriff's Department. The sheriff wanted to go try to obtain, rapid DNA. So in doing so, it's looking for funding, and we are going through that process right now. We are hoping to begin our program in about 18 months through a federal grant that we applied for. So the grant that we applied for was the Congressional Community Improvement Project Program. I believe I said that right. So this is what they talked about earlier about the earmarked funds that will be allowed for rapid DNA. So we were made aware of this early last year, late 2022. There's 35 law enforcement agencies that are aware of this funding as well, and how the program works. It's pretty simple. So you got to reach out to your local congressperson. In our case, we used Senator Lindsey Graham. The sheriff reached out, let him know that this is something that we are interested in, we are going to try to do. And through that, we had to fill out an application process. So I am not the smartest person when it comes to this stuff. So I was more than comfortable filling out this application. I do not know the technical ins and outs or anything like that with DNA, but I was still able to fill this out. It was very easy. It took maybe 2 hours at most. In that application process, I just get an email saying that we are in the process of going through this, and we'll see what happens. So I believe this year's application process already closed, or it's about to close, one of the two. So if you haven't applied for it, I think there's 3 or 4 agencies in South Carolina besides us that also put in for it. But if you haven't applied for it this year, I would start looking in February of next year. It's the federal government, so the spending protocols always change over and over if they can get a balanced budget or not. So that date varied. We started looking in February to see when this was going to happen, and it ended up opening up all the way in April. But hopefully here in the next couple of months, once Congress passes the final budget, which is going to be later on this year, we'll know whether or not we are selected for this funding. If we are selected for the funding, then we will start going through the process of obtaining this grant through the Bureau of Justice programs. And we'll see how that works out. Hopefully that's something that we get to do. We're optimistic about it. I think it was Lisa that just said they're having an 80% success rate with getting this funding. So we're really encouraged, and we hope that we are able to do that. So like I said, in about 18 months, hopefully we'll have the funding, we'll be able to start this program. There's 3 or 4 other agencies in South Carolina that are doing it. I know SLED's going to work on it. So we're going to work on a good partnership with those other agencies and with SLED, so we can try to get this program up and running the best that we can. And luckily for us, SLED's right across the river. It's a very close drive, so we can work on all that. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, you can ask me after we're done, but I think that's it.
Thank you, Captain Lanes. Our next presenter today is Doug Hares, who currently serves as the FBI Rapid DNA Implementation Advisor before landing the Rapid DNA effort for the FBI laboratory. Doug served as the FBI's custodian for the National DNA Index System and served as a liaison to all CODIS programs throughout the country. Doug will give us an update on the FBI's path for forensic DNA use in CODIS. Over to you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. We may go just a few minutes overtime after our next presentation, so we probably will not have time for questions, but please email me any questions that you have, and I will forward it along to the panel, and we'll have your questions answered by the end of the week. And our final presenter today is Anna Simmons. Anna currently serves as the DNA database technical leader. She has been employed by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division for over 11 years and has experience in forensic serology and DNA analysis of database samples. Anna is assigned to the DNA database unit at the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division and maintains the state-level CODIS database. She also performed the validation of rapid DNA for reference samples at South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Lauren. As Lauren said, my name is Anna Loper, and I'm the technical leader of the DNA database department at SLED, and I'll be discussing the future of rapid DNA in South Carolina. I am so sorry about that, technical difficulties. As I said, I was going to discuss the future of rapid DNA in South Carolina. As we've seen today from the other presentations, rapid DNA technology is quickly growing along with the applications for it. Rapid DNA is currently approved by the FBI for use in booking stations to process reference samples collected from qualifying arrestees. This is a fully automated process, which means that any DNA profiles developed from these instruments and that pass all quality flags can be immediately uploaded to CODIS. Rapid is also currently approved by the FBI for use in the laboratory to process reference samples for qualifying convicted offenders and arrestees. Depending on the quality of the profile generated, this process can require minimal review by an analyst before these profiles are then uploaded to CODIS within the laboratory. As we also heard during the FBI's presentation, profiles developed from crime scene evidence are not currently eligible for upload to CODIS. The FBI is actively working on updating the standards and evaluating rapid systems to determine the suitability for rapid on crime scene samples. Even after the FBI approves the use of rapid on crime scene evidence, the process will still require support and interpretation by laboratory personnel. For CODIS upload, anyone who's interested in this technology will need to have an MOU with an INDUS participating laboratory. As for the current status of rapid in South Carolina, although South Carolina is an arrestee DNA collection state, we do not currently have any booking stations with rapid DNA technology. From our understanding, making the connection between the booking station to CODIS requires a great deal of network infrastructure. So if your agency is interested in rapid for booking station, please notify SLED as soon as possible, as we would need to begin planning for this. SLED's DNA database department, which is where I work, also utilizes a rapid DNA instrument for processing reference samples from qualified convicted offenders and arrestees. Samples are then uploaded to CODIS, and then the DNA database also uses rapid as part of our confirmation process when there's a CODIS hit in a case. This can help us get the offender's information to the investigator as quickly as possible. We've also recently become aware that the South Carolina Coroners Association has purchased 3 rapid instruments for the identification of bodies and other human remains. And then finally, we know there are a few counties, such as Lexington, who we heard from, that have applied for funding for rapid program implementation at their agency. So we do know that there is some general interest there. SLED and the FBI are committed to addressing the challenges posed by the analysis of crime scene samples using rapid DNA instruments. Manufacturers have been working with the FBI on upgrading their systems to ensure that they're suitable for use on crime scene samples. The FBI is also working on the approval of these systems for CODIS eligibility, and the new QAS standards are being drafted. Once the FBI approval is complete, SLED will begin the validation of the 2 different rapid instruments. We will develop protocols and training programs for use within the SLED laboratory, and that will allow SLED's DNA analysts to become familiar with both systems in order to prepare to provide this external support that will be needed for local agencies. As an assisting agency, SLED realizes that there is a great importance in partnering with stakeholders to maximize the benefits of this technology, which we believe could be an effective tool in the reduction of criminal activity. However, as an accredited laboratory with CODIS access, we must work within the limits of our accreditation and the FBI's quality assurance standards. Once a rapid program is in place, any local agencies who would like to participate in this program would fall under SLED's accreditation umbrella. So we will have to be very diligent in ensuring that all requirements are met. The benefits of uploading profiles to CODIS cannot be underestimated. There are currently over 23 million profiles in the national database. And although RAPID can be used outside of CODIS for direct comparisons to suspect standards, as well as building local databases, this greatly reduces the chance of solving a case without the possibility of a database hit. So any profiles developed by your agency prior to partnering with an accredited laboratory will not be eligible for CODIS. At this time, we do not plan to provide reachback support outside of our accreditation scope. SLED believes in the importance of following all FBI and accreditation standards and requirements in order to protect the integrity of DNA testing. So SLED is going to focus on all DNA efforts on programs where resulting profiles will be CODIS eligible. So if your agency moves forward with rapid DNA technology, prior to the implementation of SLED's program, you will need to purchase that reachback support from a private laboratory or have an MOU with a local laboratory. As for SLED's timeline, in 2024, our goal is to meet with the FBI implementation team as well as the rapid DNA vendors. And then we also plan to hold a law enforcement and criminal justice stakeholders meeting. And then we'll begin the process of acquiring rapid instruments for validation and training. Finally, we will attend professional meetings to obtain the most up-to-date information related to RAPID, which will be an ongoing activity. In 2025, the new QAS standards will be released by the FBI. SLED will then be able to complete validations on both systems using those standards for use within SLED's laboratory. We'll also draft policies and procedures for within the laboratory. This will help us develop our own set of validation requirements and training programs for instrument operators and local agencies. And then we will continue to hold stakeholder meetings and attend professional meetings to gather the most up-to-date information about RAPID. And then finally, in 2026, it's our goal to implement a statewide rapid DNA program for crime scene evidence, given that there is the interest by local agencies. SLED will provide policies, procedures, training, and validation assistance. And that will require us to expand the scope of our accreditation to include any participating agencies. Once we've obtained the FBI approval for upload of crime scene profiles generated by RAPID to CODIS, we will begin uploading these profiles. Because any participants will fall under SLED's accreditation umbrella, there will be active monitoring of all participating locations. And then finally, for planning purposes, I really just want to emphasize that if you or your agency is interested in obtaining a rapid instrument, please notify us as soon as possible. We just really need to know for planning. So here is the SLED Rapid DNA email. It's rapiddna@sled.sc.gov. So you can just email us any questions or just to let us know if you are interested in the program. And that will also be how we contact people about the stakeholders meetings. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And it looks like we do have time for just a couple questions. This one is for Doug. This question says, states that have implemented rapid DNA at the booking stations, such as Louisiana, found it to be a time-intensive process. Can you give us any insight why a statewide program to allow evidence tested on rapid into CODIS might have an easier path from a state crime lab implementation perspective?
Sure. That's a really good question. With Booking Station, we're automating the entire process. And so there were a lot of things that had to be built. For crime scene, there isn't anything that needs to be built. There isn't an infrastructure. The only thing you have to be able to do is get the data to the crime lab, so they can get it into CODIS, but there isn't all of these requirements for building that infrastructure from criminal history. We don't have to link all of that stuff together. And so I really do see a little bit of a quicker implementation than the booking station, because it doesn't require that infrastructure building as much. There are plenty of ways to get that data in a secure fashion to the crime lab. And so it's just a matter of identifying the one you want to use.
Thanks, Doug. We'll take one more question. This one is for Anna. If SLED is going to create a future statewide program for evidence tested by law enforcement on rapid DNA to be compared to criminal offenders in CODIS, SLED will need personnel dedicated to completing the DNA match review. As you and the other speakers mentioned, SLED currently does not have the resources to provide this function. Is there any discussion to make a future legislative funding request to SLED so SLED could offer these services?
So at this point in the process, we really just need to focus on finding out what the interest is from the local agencies, so that we know what resources we need. And that's where this working group that we're going to form for the stakeholders will come into play. So again, if anyone is interested in this program, we really just need to know what that interest is at this point. So if they can just email that SLED rapid DNA email address, that would be great.
Thanks, Anna. We'll take one more. This one's for Captain Lanes. You indicated you will be following the 2-swab protocol. Has your research uncovered the impact on whether defendants that are identified on the rapid swab fled out, therefore reducing the need for the second swab to be tested by the crime lab?
So no, in research, we have not found any of that. I would think that the two swab approach is what is needed. So even if it's a violent crime or something like that, we still want it to go to SLED and SLED to do the proper testing, I guess I'll call it. But that allows them to verify, so they can come and test, they can come testify, and they can do all of that. I think the two swab approach, the A and B swab, is going to be an absolute must, and we need to have both those. And it's always good to have that second one for SLED anyway. So
Thanks, Captain. So that wraps up our webinar for today. Thank you to all of our presenters and everyone who joined us. We hope this information is helpful as you consider the issues related to advancing rapid DNA in your jurisdiction. And please feel free to reach out to GTH DNA or any of the presenters if you have any questions. We also encourage you to visit www.gorapiddna.com, where you can find additional rapid DNA policy and program information and updates. And we are also planning to post today's webinar and most of the presentations on the Go Rapid DNA website if you would like to review it or share it with others in your office. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.